When people saw her get off the train, when the other executives saw her, they went to David Selznick and said, "You're crazy. How could you have signed this woman? They're not going to like her."
Katharine Hepburn did not look particularly beautiful.
Everything about her was angles and sharp. She was very thin, and it was fascinating, but not altogether pleasant.
When she was off screen, she had these glorious freckles, and then this bright red hair, which is her real color, you know.
Even though she had worked her way up in the theater, as far as movies go, she started as a star, really. A Bill of Divorcement is made to put her over. She gets an entrance by George Cukor.
For the first 10 minutes at the preview of that movie, the audience was shuffling in their seats. They didn't really know what to make of her because they'd never really seen anyone like her.
And then there was a moment where the camera was just on her, and she wasn't talking or doing anything, and she was just moving, and she threw pillows down on the ground and stretched out on the ground.
That's the very moment when she became a star. No one had ever seen anyone do anything like that. It was just such a natural move. She stretched her arms out, kind of like a panther sitting down after eating its prey.
Played the wonderful character of Jo, Louisa Alcott's Little Women.
She played herself. She played Jimmy. I mean, it couldn't have been a more ideal part for her.
She formed a new core meaning of acting where a female could be unpretentious, not used in a certain way as a symbol, but a truly unique individual.
In 1933, just a year after her arrival in Hollywood, Kate won her first Oscar for the comedy Morning Glory. Here she is propelled to the rank of star at 25 years old, after only 3 films. She was provocative, intriguing, so the tabloids began to dig into her personal life.
She didn't seem to be a woman who could become attached to a man for very long.
She was married young to a childhood friend, and it is somewhat apparent that that was as much of an arranged marriage as a real marriage.
When she married him, this was in the period when she was getting fired all the time. So she was not established in the theater at all. And so maybe being his wife might be something that she could fall back on. But that was a brief period, you know. Once her career starts going, Luddy, her husband, was very much in the background.
Katharine divorced secretly in the early 1930s. She wanted to devote her increasingly precious energy to building not a family, but a career in Hollywood.
She had this affair with Howard Hughes, but Howard Hughes was not a settling down type either.
He was earning $100,000 a day from his father's tool patents. But he went to Hollywood strictly because he was fascinated by the movies and he wanted to make movies.
And he was interested in airplanes. And she was very interested in that, too. And so he would take her up flying, and it made sense, briefly, for them to be together because they did have some things in common.
She worried about him. He did crazy things, and she would try to tell him, you shouldn't do that, or whatever. But he's not going to listen to her, and she eventually realized, I can't change Howard Hughes. So she moved on.
Katharine Hepburn blends easily into these roles of strong women against the current of the fashionable ingenues of the time. She was eccentric, and she assumed it well beyond the set.
She didn't like wearing skirts. She was a tomboy, and she wanted to be active. Anything that impeded her movement, she didn't like it. She thought it was hopeless.
She really loved wearing slacks all the time, and she looked wonderful in slacks. She thought that the separation between men and women were ridiculous, that women could be as masculine as they wanted to be, and men could be as feminine as they wanted to be.
When she first arrived in Los Angeles, she moved to Hollywood with her best friend and lived with her for her first years in Hollywood.
She would sometimes pick up the phone and say, "This is Katharine Hepburn's husband." And, you know, people would laugh.
They did not do anything to hide the fact that they were a couple. They presented themselves as a couple. They told people that they were married. For all intents and purposes, they were a couple.
They didn't consider themselves lesbians. Lesbians to them were the women who dressed in ties in bars and were very butch, whereas to them that was a vulgar thing.
Director George Cukor took into account the boyish side of Kate. In Sylvia Scarlett, he offered her the part of a pickpocket who disguises herself to escape the police. For the 1936 audience, it was provocation.
Oh, I say, that's marvelous.
I say, I wonder what it'd be like to kiss anybody with a mustache like that.
I don't know.
Let's try.
But when it came out, it was way ahead of its time. She was popular with the sophisticated, intelligent audiences in that younger period of hers. But she annoyed the mainstream audience in the 1930s. There's a story called Katherine of Arrogance, you know, and the press was not really on her side.
As a result, audiences began to desert Katharine Hepburn. So much so that in 1938, an article named her box office poison, a heavy blow for the young actress.
Because her films weren't making money at the box office. There had been financial flops, and she had gone too far with Sylvia Scarlett. I think that's a big part of it, too. So she went back home to Fenwick, and she was at loose ends.
Kate's first career in Hollywood lasted only 4 years. With a heavy heart, she returned to her family and the East Coast that she held so dear.